Dun, 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 dun. Oh, hey! Don't mind me, I'm just putting my Halloween decorations away. Man, I can't believe it's already November. The year's almost over. Time really flies, huh? What? No, it's not July. What are you talking about? 2025 is such an exciting year for gaming. The Switch 2, Silksong, new Deltarune chapters, Metroid Prime 4, Mario Kart World, bankruptcy, and... Hi, Pokemon. What half-baked disappointment do you have planned for us this year? Ah, damn it. How am I supposed to be sarcastically cynical when I'm actually excited for this one? Yeah, new Legends game is coming out, and upon seeing the first two trailers, most people probably noted the new battling gimmick, or great-looking character designs, or GameCube-ass flat-texture buildings. Then sure, that's all great, but what really grabbed my and many others' attention was the user interface. Sorry, hold on. Uh-huh. Yeah? Okay, thanks. I have been informed I am the only one who gives a shit. A game's user interface, or UI, makes up the things that a player interacts with to actually navigate the game, from a heads-up display, to the menus, to dialogue boxes. While I have seen a large uptake in discussion surrounding gaming UIs, I surprisingly haven't seen a lot of that discussion directed towards the biggest media franchise on Earth, Pokémon. Which is a real shame, because I think the series has a lot of interesting history surrounding its UI. Some good, some bad, some ugly, so let's talk about it. But hold on. What makes a UI good? Well, I'm not a UI designer, I'm just a dumb cat on the internet, so take what I say with a grain of salt, but I'm going to be judging each game's interface on three main factors: clarity, distinction, and aesthetic. Clarity refers to the formatting of each element, how clear it is to the player what each part of the UI represents, along with how easy it is to navigate to each element. If it's not clear to the player what something does, or navigating to it is a chore, then I'm going to say it has poor clarity. Distinction refers to how a game's interface differentiates itself from other titles, both within the series and gaming as a whole. Basically, be unique. This is a little hard to judge since nothing is wholly original and design trends are a real thing, but I'm going to try my best here. Finally, we have aesthetics, which is not only how good the UI looks, but how its design complements the rest of the game. You can't just put Persona 5's UI into Hollow Knight. Even if a game's menus look aesthetically pleasing, if it doesn't fit the vibe of the game as a whole, I'm going to be docking points. Oh, right. Each element will be judged on a 0 to 3 point scale, with a maximum of 9 points total. Did I steal this point system from Jay's review Sonic level rankings? Yes, let's talk about UI now. Naturally, we're starting with Generation 1, and immediately these games get points for distinctiveness for the Pokeballs on the corner of the text boxes. This is really cute and a great way to make the menu stand out. When you see this text box graphic, you know right away it comes from Pokemon. It's iconic. Interestingly, this was added in Pocket Monsters Blue in Japan. Red and Green didn't have this. Since the international releases of these games use the sprite assets from Pocket Monsters Blue, this carried over into those releases. The Pokédex is fun, it's laid out pretty well and has a nice retro tech look to it. I always imagine these little blocks as big hinges opening the decks up like an anime. I also like the in-battle health menu. It's all in this half-closed container with an arrow pointing at each Pokemon, subtly showing that this is Bulbasaur and this is Charmander. I think it could do with being moved down a pixel or two. It gets a little cozy up top here, but it quickly shows almost everything you need to know at a glance. With all of these positives, you might think this game's UI does a pretty excellent job all around. No. Something that affects the battle menu, but especially affects the overworld menus, is the really ugly text box overlapping. Like, I didn't really notice it until recently, but this looks gross. Just look at what happens when you try to save. This is 4 different text boxes, almost all of which are overlapping each other. I get that the Game Boy had limited screen real estate, but clear out one of them at least! Look at the box, which, on its own, I don't even need to talk about how terrible this thing is to navigate. You can't even see the world with this many text boxes. At that point, open up a new screen entirely, like what the Game Boy Zelda games do with their inventories. In fact, do that with the actual inventory too. Navigating this list is infamously frustrating. And speaking of the text box, remember how I praised the design of it earlier? Take a look at it again. Notice anything? Yeah, it's asymmetrical. This line, for whatever reason, is slightly to the left. You will never be able to unsee this. You're welcome. Generation 2's UI, much like the rest of the generation, is really just a cleaned up version of Gen 1's. For one, hey! They realized their mistakes and made the bag and PC menus their own screens, and navigating them is much smoother. The bag now has different sub-menus for general items, Pokeballs, key items, and TMs, showing that Gold and Chris are much more organized than Red was. Item icons would have been nice, but this is still great. Moving to the Game Boy Color let them utilize just that in these menus. though I do wish they would have for the frames, especially since you can now choose through a list of them. None of them are as iconic or distinct as Gen 1's, unfortunately, and while that gen's lack of midtones in the menus wasn't really a big enough deal to make a fuss about, the added color in Gen 2 makes it stick out a little bit. This is especially true because all of the added menus and pop-ups, including this cute new wooden town/route marker, do utilize color. The Pokédex is awesome though, having a black and red aesthetic with this green display showing the Pokémon sprite, almost mimicking the original Game Boy's green LCD screen. The battle UI has also seen a huge upgrade. It keeps what worked from Gen 1, like the arrow and container, while cleaning it up and making it look a lot more finished. And hey, an XP bar! You might have noticed I didn't mention that when talking about Gen 1, even though it's by far the single biggest complaint people have with that game's battle UI. The reason for that is, from what I can tell, Gold and Silver was the first big game to even include an in-battle XP bar. Don't quote me on that, I don't have a JRPG EXP PhD, but it seems that in-battle EXP bars just weren't a thing back then. Plenty of games still don't have them, including the latest Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy titles. While I'm sure there's some game out there that included it long before Pokemon did, please correct me if I'm wrong here, from what I can find, this is an element pioneered by this franchise, which is really cool. It shows how Pokemon used to be a real influence in gaming. Used to. While not as iconic or distinct as Gen 1's UI, Gen 2's is a millennium ahead in terms of quality, removing a lot of the original game's frustrations while retaining an iconic look. Generation 3 was a major leap in terms of graphics, which means the UI obviously got an upgrade too. For once, we have multiple games to talk about, so let's first look at Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald. Small thing, the frames are now in full color! They're pretty fucking ugly, not gonna lie, but hey, color! The entire UI has this subtle scanline effect. You can see it in the naming menu, behind each Pokemon on the summary screen, in the battle backgrounds, and that, combined with the colors, gives this fun Y2K feel. It also reminds me of Windows XP in a weird way, which would make sense for the time. Speaking of battles, the UI here looks great! The health container is essentially just Gen 2's, but in its own full container due to more complex backgrounds. It all feels a lot more cleaned up, and takes advantage of the increased screen real estate. I like how choosing Fight puts your moves over here, while the power points and move type is over here to fill the entire container and not cover up any of the action. The party screen is much improved, giving each mon their own sprite and putting the lead of the party over here, so you can tell from a glance who will be sent out. This is the only generation that does this, which is strange to me, because this layout is what I immediately think of when I think of a Pokemon party menu, but it's exclusive to this generation. I would be remiss not to talk about the new box system. It's perfect. My only complaint is that the cursor doesn't default to move Pokemon. This has caused a lot of, I spammed A too much, gotta back out, fucking piece. The bag screen looks nice, and includes item icons now. The thing I dislike most about this UI is the dex. I just think it's ugly, I can't really explain it much other than that. With all that, the UI of Hoenn feels like a natural evolution of Gen 2's, while also doing its own thing, which is exactly what it needed to be. FireRed and LeafGreen naturally took a lot of design cues from Ruby and Sapphire, reusing a lot of its assets, like the default text box border, though they gave us some much less ugly custom options. When an NPC is speaking, the text will be red for when girls talk and blue for boys, which is cute if not a little stereotypical. That's why I'm transvem. I always played red as a kid, and red is the girl color. I don't like this text box. They had the perfect opportunity to bring back the fun Pokeballs from Gen 1, and instead gave us a box that looks like a pill container. The white and pale blue make this look so sterile, like a hospital. I don't think this fits the game at all. Boring as it is, I much prefer the text box that appears when you interact with the sign, or hey, just use the customizable frames. The battle menu is exactly the same as RSE's, with a different color main text box, which looks nice enough. A really cute detail I want to point out is the bag has a stitch line pattern underlining the text, separating each item while sticking to the bag theme. I think a lot of the colors work better than they did in RSE, and I like how the help pages have this blue Pokedex and journal aesthetic. It makes this feel a lot more like a personal journey. The Pokedex itself, however, sucks! This is not fun to navigate. It doesn't show the Pokemon sprites as you scroll down the list, something even Gen 2 did, and the use of browns doesn't really scream Pokedex to me. I appreciate the habitat sections, but I don't know, it's all just a little too clunky to navigate. I think, aesthetically, these games are a lot more coherent looking than the Hoenn titles, but a lot of choices here feel really iffy. Speaking of really iffy, Diamond and Pearl brought the series to the DS, a system with a bottom touchscreen that allowed developers to design UI elements to be accessed by directly tapping on them. Surely this means that Game Freak took the opportunity to utilize the bottom screen in a fun, interesting way, right? They get it right, like, twice. Most notably in the battle menu, where all of the options are relegated to the bottom screen, while the actual battle is shown up top. This heavily streamlines picking an option while clearing up the top screen to give us a better look at the action, and while it's most intuitive to use touch controls, you can still navigate using the buttons. I have friends who are similar in this way. The fight button is the largest on the screen, as that's the option you'll be using most of the time, and behind it are little grayed out icons that light up with the Pokemon's moves when you choose fight. The items menu now has a last use item option, which is very useful. In terms of functionality, my biggest criticism is that you have to press a button before activating the button controls. I just feel like the cursor should be there automatically. The health bar is cute. Rather than a simple arrow pointing at the Pokemon, it kinda looks like a little speech bubble, and tell me that's not adorable. With this amount of positives, I must really like this game's UI, right?
I blows!
For one, outside of battling, the integration of the touchscreen is horrendous. You can't use it to navigate the start menu, move Pokemon, or navigate the bag or boxes. And don't even try to tell me, well, technically you can use the touchscreen to navigate your bag and boxes by scrolling the Pokeball and tapping the buttons, because have you ever tried to do that? If you have, you know that it's dumb and useless and sucks. Just put the actual menus on the bottom screen and let us drag and drop things. Why did they go out of their way to not put the menus on the touchscreen and then band-aid a solution that doesn't feel good to use? Especially when the game starts out requiring you to tap the touchscreen. Outside of the menus, the bottom screen is used for the Pokédex, which is actually pretty solid. You can customize it to be basically anything you like after you unlock each app, from Pokemon Health Monitor to a map to a calculator. It's good, I like it. What I don't like is that you're forced to have a blue one if you're a boy and a pink one if you're a girl. Not only is that super stereotypy, I would have appreciated a bit more customization there. They try to tell you there are only 2 colors or some bullshit like that, but no, there aren't! Barry gets an orange one. Maybe I want an orange Pokédex. Oh, no, sorry. Barry got his custom made, that entitled prick. And I'm just gonna say it, this UI as a whole looks disgusting. I get what they were going for with the bright colors and 3D shapes, and I do appreciate that idea, but the way it's executed here looks tacky and incoherent. The colors they chose are super muddy and gross looking, in my opinion anyway. I'm sure there are people who like how this all looks, which, more power to ya. UI is an art, and art is subjective. But looking at this is just gross to me, man. While Gen 3's interface looked of the era but not too dated, Gen 4's looks outdated by 2006 and 2024 standards. Guys, it's not July, are y'all feeling alright? And it's especially frustrating when we've seen the beta of this game, and you know what? Let's quickly talk about the Diamond and Pearl beta. In 2020, a beta build of Diamond and Pearl from March 2006 was leaked and released to the public, revealing a battle UI that looks way different from the one we ultimately got. Looking at the top screen, the health markers are very different from the final build. They're brown, almost looking like old paper or a wooden sign to me, which fits Sinnoh's emphasis on legends and tradition incredibly well. They're a bit heavy-handed with this arrow appearing. I feel like we don't need that at this point. This is post-Pokemania. This battle layout has become series standard, and I think people can intuit that this is a Turtwig. But the most obvious change happens on the bottom screen. The buttons look cleaner, still having a 3D look to them while looking much better than the boxes of the retail game, and you can even find remnants of this design in the retail product. And look at that background! I can understand why they changed this background specifically, but I don't know why they changed the rest, especially because this build was some 6 months prior to release and the entire game is completely unfinished. I'm not going to score this UI, as again, the rest of the game is not properly implemented, but if the retail release had this as its battle UI, it would have gotten a lot more points. Platinum also basically has the same UI and issues as Diamond and Pearl, but the battle UI uses darker colors, which gives it a slight edge in terms of aesthetic to me. It's nothing too spectacular, but it does look better, which is worth an extra point. Only one though, I still kinda hate this. The 4th generation of Pokemon games wrapped up with HeartGold and SoulSilver, and seeing as how I had written down in my initial notes, "This is how you fucking do it!" exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point. Yeah, I really like this UI. I like it so much that it gets a perfect score. It basically takes every issue from the Sinnoh games and fixes them. For one, they actually utilize the touchscreen outside of battles in a meaningful way, almost to a comical extent. I do miss the Pokédex a bit, but it's more than made up for by the fact that your start menu is always accessible down here. You can press the X button to use button controls, absolutely, and that's still intuitive, but you also have the option to tap the buttons on the bottom screen and instantly be taken to whatever menu you want. The bag, navigated via touchscreen. Pokemon, navigated via touchscreen. You can drag Pokemon or their moves to switch their order, though I'll admit it's a tad clunky. You can even toggle running shoes using the bottom screen. In terms of function and clarity, these games absolutely nail it. I'm pretty sure you could play the entire game with just the D-pad and touchscreen, Metroid Prime Hunter style. The familiar Pokeball iconography is used sparingly enough throughout the UI to not get repetitive, but often enough to remind you you're playing a Pokemon game. And aesthetically, this game's interface is gorgeous! Each element has depth and looks three-dimensional, but avoids being tacky or messy. It all looks super clean, but not flat or boring. The trainer model in the bag is a nice touch, as are the different cards for whether you're entering a route or town. The The only issue I have in terms of aesthetic is that I think the battle UI is a bit too round. I don't know, it feels spaced apart weirdly and doesn't look like it matches the rest of the UI as much as it could. But that's one minor nitpick I have in what is absolutely my favorite UI so far. When an interface makes you actively excited when you see it, you know you've done something right. That's normal, right? Everyone experiences that, right? Black and White utilize the touchscreen much less than HeartGold SoulSilver, which is fine. As I said, the Johto remakes went a little overboard in terms of the touchscreen utilization. What Black and White do utilize and excel at is presentation. The Unova games have a very futuristic and sleek feel to them, and most of that comes from their interfaces. The text box here is translucent black with a thick white border, almost appearing like a pane of dark, shiny glass. The rest of the UI mimics this, such as the start menu, which also has this asymmetrical shape to the different options. Grid lines and hexagons litter the UI. It's all very geometric, exactly what the future looked like 15 years ago. The battle UI does everything well that the previous games did, keeping that subtle arrow pointed at each creature while managing to stand out and look unlike anything that came before, foregoing the large overall container and instead putting the HP in these thinner lines, with other information around it. It's very sleek. The bottom screen is much more dynamic, animating a lot more, and has this cool Pokeball design. Character text is now in these comic-style speech boxes pointed towards the speaker, clearly showing who's talking. It all adds to Unova's incredible vibe. Gen 5 wouldn't have nearly the same feel it has without this brilliant interface. Every decision made feels so intentional, rather than the slapped-together look of the Sinnoh games. However, it's not all perfect. The start menu suffers from the needing to press a button before the button controls are activated issue that the battle menu still has. And again, I wish the bottom screen was more utilized for things like decision making. I guess they thought it was a bit of a hassle to take your eyes off the top screen and look at the bottom so often, which I suppose is fair. But also, they probably didn't put so much on the bottom screen because of one big addition: the C gear. I'm gonna be straight up. I hate this thing, but I don't hate the idea of it. In fact, I love the idea of a customizable watch being on the bottom screen. It's the same idea as the Pokétch, but the C gear had the opportunity to be so much better. Tapping on any of these nodes will take you to different screens, and you can edit to move them wherever you want on this hexagonal grid. By default, these are set to IR, online, and wireless, all related to multiplayer. But you can change each spot on the grid to IR, online, wireless, and that's it. You get 3 options, all of which are related to multiplayer, functions which are useless to most people most of the time. Why is there an entire node dedicated to the IR sensor? Who used the IR sensor? It's so frustrating because this had the ability to be the ultimate customizable bottom screen. Imagine if you had the ability to change these nodes to take you to your bag, your Pokemon, activate selected key items, save, anything else you can think of. Yes, I'm just kind of reinventing the HeartGold SoulSilver bottom screen, but being able to choose how much real estate each button takes up or get rid of the ones you don't need would have been awesome. Instead, they limit us to 3 useless choices with limited options to properly curate your own experience. Wow, they really did predict the future. Seriously, this game is lucky that I only docked a single point for this. This really pisses me off. Also, blue for boys, pink for girls, and if you are a girl, the little nodes default to the heart shape while the guys get the hexagons. You can change it by tapping the Seeger icon, real intuitive, I know, and there are some cute shapes here, but as I said before, this feels incredibly stereotypy. I know I've mentioned this 3 times already, and that these games came out over 1 to 2 decades ago, but I can't ignore the fact that they deliberately made the choice to enforce these gender stereotypes multiple times. I will say, they did release custom skins for your Seeger's background, and using PK Hex you can upload your own, and that bumped my opinion of this thing a lot, but it really wasn't an intentional feature, so... Black and White, the sequels, have basically the same UI as the first games, difference being that they dialed up the cool meter to 11. Look at these town and route markers, it feels like I'm in a comic book, it's awesome! Sea Gear has been revamped, you can now change the color of the rings here, and the Sea Gear itself, which is awesome, good addition. It's otherwise basically the same, though I should mention that the color of a lot of the UI you get in both the first games and their sequels depends on which version you choose. The black games get mostly black UI, while the white games cause blindness. It's such a cool touch, I wish more games in the series did this. X and Y released for the 3DS in 2013, and with this UI, oh boy can you tell. Now for full transparency, this shiny, glossy aesthetic is one that I usually love a lot. I can really appreciate design that has depth and lighting. I don't like UI that looks dumb and flat and bland. Foreshadowing is a narrative device in which a story, but with that being said, let's admit it, X and Y's UI looks crusty as hell. I do appreciate the shadows and depth, a lot of this UI looks very good and, while of the era, not aged or outdated. Unfortunately, the phrase "a lot" is doing most of the heavy lifting there. For one, battle menu. Gross. I don't know exactly why, I just don't like this. I think it's a poor implementation of these super glossy buttons. When I think battle menu, I think of something more rough. I don't think this. The glyphs are nice, if not a bit small and hard to notice, and while I enjoy the fact that I don't need to press a button before button controls are activated, why is this the cursor they went with? The previous games did it so right, with the graphic around the buttons, not a pointer lazily slapped onto them. It just doesn't look good. Speaking of lazily slapped on, did they give up with this health bar? Gen 1's health bars look better. And where are the item icons in the bag menu? They were in Gen 5, why get rid of them? Also, fun fact, you can change the backgrounds of this bottom menu, which is great, the added customization is appreciated, but in the settings menu, you cannot preview them. You find one that's named sounds cool, and see if you like it. That's like the bare fucking minimum for this kind of thing. Outside of battling, let's look at the bottom screen. It's fucking online again! Yes, they added little glyphs here for the menus, which is better than nothing, but they're tiny, and again, why is nearly the entirety of the bottom screen dedicated to a feature that is useless to most people most of the time? Also, it's just ugly. This might be a hot take, but I do not typically think dark blue and yellow go well together. No, not even here. Luckily, you can change it to the Me or Super Training tabs, but that doesn't really fix a lot because I used Super Training a total of once in my first playthrough. I kept it on a Me, not because I used it often, but because it's pink, and the little Pokemon moving when you do is cute. Basic text box is kinda nothing, like, ooh, brown. The bag is actually pretty nice, putting your Pokemon on the left side, allowing you to drag and drop items onto them. Now, the Pokedex, this is what X and Y get right. It looks great! It's flashy, it's modern, it fits the style of the time and the region while not being dated. It really works. I would have loved to have seen the rest of the UI in that style, but as it stands, X and Y's UI mostly looks super outdated and leaves a lot to be desired. OmegaRuby and AlphaSapphire are actually pretty big improvements over X and Y. They fixed the bottom screen finally by making it a map while still giving it gateways to stuff like the DexNav and Super Training. The DexNav's map even uses sprites from the original GBA games, and the entire bottom screen is this handheld device that you have in the beginning, both of which are really cute. The entire UI has this really interesting jagged square texturing to it. I'm unsure if this is meant to look like pixels, invoking the feeling of the GBA's pixelated graphics, or if it's meant to look kind of rocky. Either way, it works. When I think of Hoenn, I think of the GBA, and I think of rocks. It also really helps distinguish the UI in a way that X and Y's didn't. It still looks considerably aged, but it's definitely an improvement. The game also recreates a lot of Gen 3's assets in HD, like the text boxes, and the battle screen's HP bars are in boxes that have the same colors as RSE's in-battle text box. That's a really cool attention to detail, as is the shape of the buttons in the battle menu being these fun glyphs. They look a little awkward, especially the shoe, but ultimately they're fun and add to visual clarity. The cursor is still terrible, but it's clear that Game Freak had learned a lot from X and Y's UI this time around. Not perfect, but a damn improvement. Heading to the Alola region, let's get right into it and start with Sun and Moon's text boxes. While the general interaction text box is nothing to write home about, unless you really like the color brown, the speech boxes are downright brilliant. The irregular shape keeps it interesting while also invoking the feel of a classic comic book speech bubble, like the last two generations did, but less direct. The name of the speaker has been placed in this blue nameplate up here, which always lets you know who's speaking, and looks great due to the way the dark blue contrasts with the white of the rest of the text box. But my favorite part of the speech box is this faint background pattern. Now, I'm admittedly not super well versed in native Hawaiian or Polynesian cultures, but I could instantly recognize this style of geometric design, present in wood carvings found in real-world Hawaii and traditional Polynesian tattoos. It's small and subtle, but adds visual interest while not being distracting, and ties into the cultural origins of Alola. I do miss the speech bubble tail from Gens 5 and 6, but for a design this great, I'm willing to overlook that. The rest of the out-of-battle UI is similarly gorgeous. I especially love how containers have this wavy oceanic pattern to separate the light and shaded parts, and interactable elements have this little triangle for the cursor to slot into. I love this new button prompt when near interactable objects. I love how the route and town markers bob up and wave like water. I love how the Pokédex shows how many Pokemon are in an evolution family. Everything about this overworld UI just clicks. It has depth while still looking clean, each element looks distinct while remaining cohesive with other parts, and it does it in a clear and easy to navigate way. And I haven't even gotten to the battle UI. Focusing on the bottom screen for now, the fight option has been moved to the right side rather than the center, though it remains the biggest and default option on the screen. While this seems like a strange choice, it makes sense when you tap on the Pokemon icons on the bottom screen, where you can see any applied stat changes, as well as get information on status effects and abilities. This is such a welcome quality of life change, removing the need to keep mental track of what stat changes have been afflicted to a specific Pokemon. Speaking of quality of life, if the opposing Pokemon is in your dex, the game will note the effectiveness of the moves in your list. The moves list also looks sick, having a wave that I mentioned previously, but this time in the form of a palm leaf. Each main option also has really nice big glyphs inside each button, also reminiscent of Polynesian designs, and the bottom screen's background has a similar geometric design we talked about earlier, but this time with the top and bottom moving in opposite directions for that dynamic feel. Also, you have a quick shortcut to using Pokeballs in wild encounters, which is another great quality of life addition. Moving our focus to the top screen and the health HUD, the health bars are not perfect rectangles. They grow and slant a little bit at the end here, which is a really dynamic visual touch. And look at that gradient! Not only does it draw your eye across the health bar, as any good gradient does, but the lower end of the bar is always closer to the color red than the higher end. When the health is green, the gradient goes to yellow, and when the health is yellow, the gradient is orange. It's such a subtle but brilliant touch that I'm not sure why they never did it before. And look at the design behind the health bar. The bright cyan, paint streak looking design feels so tropical. I also love how the level number sort of hangs off the end of the bar here. It adds a little bit of visual interest and imperfection that just ties it all together. This UI is just... dude, it's so awesome! It's by far my favorite in the entire series. It has depth, it has bright colors, it's distinct, it's perfectly Alola. Also, fun fact, the text box that appears in battle is the same text box that appears during Pokemon Trainer's Final Smash and Smash Ultimate, since Sun and Moon were the latest games at the time of its development. If you're wondering what Brawl uses Diamond and Pearls. You would expect the games that are infamously just Sun and Moon, but again, to not change a whole lot in terms of the UI, and while it's not a total overhaul, there are a lot of notable changes here. The speech boxes have new colors, with a bright blue outline and green to blue gradient on the line outside, which I think looks much better than the duller blue and black from the first Alola games. They did get rid of the design of the background though, which kinda sucks. Choice containers have a similar design, instead going from yellow to blue. The route markers are more detailed, reversing the original gradient and adding bubbles to make them pop just a little bit more, and the start menu features bright colors and even some hibiscus designs, Hawaii's official state flower. Speaking of the start menu, you can now reach the save menu with a single button press inside of it, which is incredibly appreciated. Overall, the brighter colors of the UI make it all feel a lot more vibrant and tropical, and I would say prefer this UI heavily to the originals. Except the battle UI. Focusing on the bottom screen, I actually like the button design here. It retains that tropical feel while ramping up the cool factor, even if I prefer the originals. There's no more moving elements on this screen, removing that dynamic element from the original, and the move icons got rid of the palm leaf in exchange for the generic wavy shading, which isn't bad, I just missed the palm leaf. Let's look at the top screen. Man, the health bar is a proper rectangle and it has a more generic looking container. Luckily they kept the gradient, but I don't know, man. I do like some of what they do with this, like how your Pokemon's container is more blue while the opponent's is more green, but that doesn't really fix anything. Again, this isn't bad, I just think it's worse than the first games. I guess one could argue it looks more cool, but it's less fun and fits the games less. This UI could easily score the same as Sun and Moon's, as I like a lot of what they do here, but I'm also petty, and the Battle UI downgrade drops its score just enough to lose a single point. Okay, we're out of Alola, and we're back in Kanto again. How many times are we gonna do this? Let's go Pikachu and Eevee. Bulbapedia classifies these as mainline, don't yell at me about it. This UI is... colorful. I honestly don't know how I feel about this. I like the sort of brushstroke look it has, the text box is having an imperfect yellow to purple gradient. Kanto's whole naming scheme has to do with colors, so why not incorporate it into the UI? Or don't, in the case of these town markers. They have colors, but why not take a little bit more time to make them the color of the towns themselves? You can't lie to me, this isn't Viridian! The start menu is fine. I like how it opens with this little Pokeball animation and how the option to play with your partner is up here in the shape of their head. I do find it a little unsatisfying how the first three menus have Pokeball incorporated into the glyph and the other two just don't. And the bag sucks. When you get enough items, it gets super cluttered and annoying to navigate, and you don't need this many separate pockets if you're not going to put everything in them. Why is the Pokemon box in here? Why are the battle, medicine, and power-up pockets separate? Why aren't these just tabs like in the older games? Sure, you're limited by the single Joy-Con, but this can't have been the best solution. Speaking of the Pokemon box, this shit blows. Separate boxes are gone, they're all in a list, and your party isn't denoted by a separate container or even just placed at a convenient spot, instead showing you which members are in your party as you're scrolling. Why the hell did they do this? Admittedly, the Pokeballs around the box are pretty cute. And that's something I can say about this UI. It's cute. Even the battle UI. The health bars look fine, if not a little thin, and the gradient's direction doesn't really make sense. In Sun and Moon, the yellow part was in the direction of lower health, but it's the opposite here. Then that changes when the Pokemon hits yellow health, but honestly, that makes it even more out of place. Can someone please think about the gradients? I don't like the battle options very much. The entire game had this Squircle look to the menus, which I do generally fucking hate, but that's kind of a personal thing. And the only thing I hate more than Squircles is inconsistency. These options being circular is just out of place. And at this point, we should not be scrolling through a list to navigate these menus. These should be button shortcuts, say A to fight, Y for Pokemon, X for bag, something like that. Speaking of which, put the moves in a diamond or ring formation and let us spin the control stick so we don't have to keep flicking it down to navigate the menus like a bunch of idiots. Think like what Tears of the Kingdom does with Link's abilities. This top-down list is outdated and unintuitive. And that's something I can say about this UI. It's unintuitive. I understand they had a limited control scheme to work with, but all this needed at least 2 more passes in the functionality department. Also, I don't like this font. It looks stupid and lopsided. Man, I'm tired. Moving on to an actual Pokemon game, and I have conflicting feelings about Sword and Shield's UI. I honestly think it looks kinda nice. I mean, it looks super clean, all of the elements are very sharp and clear, there's nice contrast and good color choices, and I love the consistent use of diagonal lines for each element, like with the text and selection boxes, the bag, and health bars. Though, speaking of the text boxes, this sort of loud text box does not sell it for me at all. It looks more like a fancy banner than a representation of a shouting voice. I think this UI baseline looks good, but with that, it also looks really bland. It suffers a lot from that modern corporate Memphis style that got super popular around this time. Flat colors, lack of gradients and shading, boring sans serif typefaces, it looks generic. To be fair, I think these games managed to pull it off better than most other attempts at this, managing to not look too bland. I just wish it had more personality. I think it manages to be a lot more clear than the previous games, at least with the bag not sucking ass. The fight menu is, in terms of function, basically the same though. You don't have the Joy-Con excuse, you can stop with the top-down lists. And while I like the glyphs, does it trip anyone else that the run glyph is purple and not blue? This is the only time it's purple, it's always been blue, it goes back to being blue, why did they change it? Why do I care? I appreciate the translation of the Gen 7 stat change menu. They could have easily abandoned that after the loss of the touchscreen, but they kept it in. I also like being able to favorite items. I'm pretty sure you could do that in Let's Go, but who fucking cares? The health bars, I don't even know, man. I miss the health gradient, and I don't really get why the gender marker is so in your face. I feel like they could have made the glyph itself colored instead of putting it in a colored circle. I have nothing better to say about this. Galar's interface is just kind of forgettable. It gets lost in the sea of flat, boring modern UI, and I think that's a shame. Ever since Gen 3, even if I didn't necessarily like the UI, it would always stand out against the crowd, and I don't think Sword and Shield does that. Does it look bad? No. Again, I actually really like the colors and shape language. It just feels like it's missing something, you know? Okay, so the beginning of Pokemon Switch era was kinda disappointing. Maybe the next game will do something. Ugh. Alright, let's make this quick. This is basically like if you took the look of Diamond and Pearl's UI and slapped it onto Sword and Shield's layout. Wow, I wonder how Hutch feels about that. Okay, I will say, this does a few things better than Diamond and Pearl. Like this tab on the top of the speech bubbles, for example. Also, quick aside, this is where they finally established consistent glyphs for the Pokemon types, which is cool. Only took them 30 years, but still, cool. I think the UI is ugly as shit, much like the rest of the game, but it's, you know, it's better than Diamond and Pearl's, I guess. I kinda wish it used Platinum's UI as a basis, or hey, the DP prototype brought to fruition would have been cool, but overall I have really nothing to say here. I don't like how the buttons don't properly push down when you select them. Weird fucking nitpick, I know, but it looks ugly and unfinished. Oh, that's why! It's a perfect match for these games! Ugh, this part of the retrospective is making me depressed. Alright, what's the next interface I gotta look at? Whoa. Hey, this UI is actually pretty good. This UI is really good! Hold on, they really stepped up their game here, what the hell? Yeah, I love this UI. A lot. Always have. Now, you're gonna have to throw all your pre-established muscle memory out the window for this. X no longer opens up the menu. It switches between throwing Pokemon and items. Up on the D-pad is now the menu button, and the Dex now has its own button, being down. While this can mess with your instincts for a while, it makes sense with the more reaction-based gameplay of Legends Arceus, with X being a lot more readily accessible and intuitive in higher stress situations. In terms of looks, alright, you all know how good this game's UI looks. It's beautiful and fits the game perfectly. The inky browns, off-white, and navy blue come together with the shape language to really sell that old Japanese style, with a lot of elements looking like brushstrokes and old paper. And the battle UI, the battle UI! Alright, first let's focus on navigation. Remember when I said, and at this point, we should not be scrolling through a list to navigate these menus. These should be button shortcuts, say A to fight, Y for Pokemon, X for bag, something like that. Yeah, they did that. A to fight, B to run, D-pad up for items, down for Pokemon, and you can switch out Pokemon on the fly by selecting them with L and R and then throwing them out with ZR. God, it's just perfect. It makes the, 10 battles in this game super snappy. You can access whatever menu you want immediately without sluggishly scrolling through a list. You do still have to select your moves that way, but those are more deliberate choices you can't back out of, so I understand wanting to decrease the likelihood of misclicks. Though I would still like to see the move ring idea implemented. This HUD, by the way, is a goddamn work of art. The action order looks like a group of book tabs. The Pokemon's levels in this hexagon that reminds me of a label on a book cover. The brushstroke motif is all over with the font and text box. I love this one behind your Pokemon's health especially. Frankly, my only gripe is that they should have gone further with it. Make the health bar a brushstroke. The Pokemon icons look like actual printed photographs. Just more of this. But even still, this UI, it just rocks, dude. It's clear, it's unified, it's distinct, and it looks fucking good. When I first played this game almost 3 years ago, it's not July! I knew the UI of the next mainline games would be even better. God damn it. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Is this game a joke? Cause the punchline is me losing $85. Yes, I bought the DLC. I'm a fucking schmuck. What do you want from me? Okay, what do I like about this UI? It's less generic than Sword and Shields? Barely? Maybe. I really like this gradient on this cursor. I don't fucking know, man. This is the most we did slightly more than the bare minimum UI I've ever seen. Like, wow, the text boxes are rounded rectangles, but with some added lines. The start menu is a rounded rectangle in navy blue and white. Man, at least Sword and Shield fucking tried. That game had clean-looking shape language, good colors, and a better understanding of good design. This UI has not that. On the topic of colors, you know how I said I don't think dark blue and yellow look very good together? My opinion has not changed. Also, this DLC pop-up is permanently stuck on the start menu, even once you get the DLC, like a tumor with Pokemon stickers slapped onto it, and at that point it's just patronizing. Yes, I know it was there in Sword and Shield, but it wasn't nearly this gross looking. It's just ugly and boring, man. For as much as the rest of the game shows off how these two versions are completely different games, guys, we swear, they sure as hell don't do that for their UI. From what I found, this part of the bag is the only part that changes depending on your version. Like, this game has such an interesting overall theme that it could be easily explored with a UI. Scarlet could have had a prehistoric theme, Violet a futuristic one, each using their own respective colors. You wouldn't need to push it that far for the effect to come across, and it could have been really cool. But no, that would require twice the amount of work to make two different UI systems, and this game needed to launch 2 weeks before it started development. The battle UI sucks! Like the rest of the UI, it's fucking fine, I guess. It gets the job done, but man, these health bars are fucking boring. Yeah, it's a fucking rectangle in front of another rectangle. Good job, guys. Whoa, the behind rectangle disappears during move animations. This game is so dynamic. Look how dynamic it is. And we're back to the fucking list. Really, guys? We moved past this already. Why did you go back? The entire UI is just so flat and uninspired. It manages to neither stand out nor look clean. In fact, I think I prefer Sword and Shield's UI, which I never thought I would say. To give this game some credit, I like the Pokédex app, even if I hate that they made it an app. The library aesthetic is very nice and surprisingly new for the series. That's it. That's all the credit it gets. I'm done talking about this UI. It sucks. I don't like it. It's the laziest attempt at a user interface so far in the series. I didn't even talk about how goddamn egregious the map is, and Sprigatito deserved a better game! Okay, well, we've gone through all the games that have been released so far, so there's just one left. The upcoming Legends ZA. Does that date this video too much? Should I worry about dating? After the disappointment of Scarlet and Violet, I don't have much high hopes for this game's UI. I have never been so happy to be so wrong. This UI looks clean, but in a way that looks actually interesting. The rounded rectangles have these borders inside of them that add some distinct visual interest. The different shades of blue pop and go well with each other. They're good-looking gradients. They actually figured out how to make good-looking futuristic UI in HD. I don't think any UI like this would ever get full marks for distinction, but it's damn close. Even the battle UI looks great. Amazing, even! I mean, just look at the health bar. Everything's nice and compact, not wasting space while still being readable and having room to breathe. The bar itself has this fun notch here that adds some visual intrigue, and your entire party is visible, unlike Arceus, but remains uncluttered. And yo, they finally fucking did it! A proper move wheel. Sure, the action indicator, opponent health bar, and move log here leave a bit to be desired, but they hardly look bad, just kind of meh. I do think the action indicator display thing kind of covers up the gameplay a bit. I do hope we can hide that. Though, I mean, give those elements some added visual interest and add a gradient to the health bar, and dare I say it, this battle UI might be perfect. For this game, anyway. I'm not seeing a bag option here, so we'll have to wait and see about that. Also, minus is the run button, it would seem. I mean, okay. Moving out of battle, the text boxes look fantastic. Could use a bit more color, but the green and white with the shape here, it all just looks wonderful together. I also really like how the text appears on the screen when you've been challenged to a battle. It's cool and dynamic. Honestly, a lot of this UI reminds me of X and Y's Pokédex, which I heavily praise, and if that was intentional, good move on Game Freak for expanding on that. This UI looks spectacular. So what have we learned? Well, as Pokemon's UI has evolved over the years, each game has brought good UI elements and bad ones. Each game brings something new and interesting to the table, and tends to expand on itself in the subsequent entry. Good UI isn't necessarily indicative of a good game, nor is bad UI indicative of a bad one. Though, for this series, my thoughts on the UI and the game quality do mostly overlap. Who knows, maybe I'll hate Legends EA but still love the UI, or maybe they'll mess something up and I'll scream at my monitor for things nobody else gives a shit about. All I ask is that, please, Game Freak, learn from Black and White. Learn from Sun and Moon, learn from the Legends games, and keep using distinct, easily navigable, fun UI going forward, because it really helps the games feel, and would personally make me very happy. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going out to enjoy some nice, brisk, late autumn November air. Global warming's really doing a number on us, huh? Hey, quick little outro thing. I wasn't able to get the Pokemon Sword and Shield footage myself, so my friend Faye did it. So go give her a follow, go view her on Twitch, all of that. Thank you so much, Faye, for getting that footage for me, because I don't own the games, and I didn't want to buy them for this.